So this session is more on how to build or how to mix different JSF 2.0 libraries, UI component libraries, and guidelines on that. It's more based on experience of other guys or other teams who used JSF 2.0 libraries, different libraries, to build their applications. So let us get started. Safe harbor statement from Oracle, give a glance. So agenda for our today's session, we'll start with an introduction and we'll talk about the evolution of JSF, popular JSF based frameworks, then interoperability and challenges, interoperability guidelines, and summary followed by Q&A. Get started. So the web-based application development strategy or scenario has been changed drastically in recent past. I remember like years back, maybe a decade back, when we talk about web application, almost all applications were focused on specific part, in the sense expose specific functionalities through the web. And there was no concept like rich internet applications or rich enterprise applications, because the technology limitations and infrastructure constraints and a lot more. So in case if a enterprise decides to build a huge application, then they may go for thick client for exposing set of functionalities, and a very limited set of functionalities were exposed through web. It was more due to the technology constraints. Ajax was not there at that time, and a lot of other stuff, bandwidth limitations and things like that. This has been changed in recent past, and if you see a transition, you could see that a paradigm shift in web application development. In years back, we were using HTML, JSP, and ASP sort of stuff. But now we are more on Ajax and related things, very hi-fi web UI you can see. And even the functionality wise, they are moving towards rich internet experience. And even not rich internet experience as such, again, one more level above rich enterprise application. It means that the application may need to talk to different applications to get data, and it provides desktop sort of experience and more interaction within the application itself. So it is more like a huge end-to-end enterprise application. So all the web applications are moving towards that direction. So what we are going to see in next few slides are, I'm trying to set up a context for JSF 2.0 cross-breeding. Like why do we need to mix libraries, and where we were previously. So rich enterprise applications are more focused on high interactivity, in the sense it interacts with the user a lot, and it interacts with other systems and gets data, then displays the data back to the user. So there are a lot of interaction happens under the cover, and it actually exposes functionalities through different channels, not only through web. It can data can be exposed through mobile devices or other terminal devices, or through other channels. So all these things are supposed to be developed by developers. So there are a lot of challenges involved. So challenges in web application development can be, say, cross-platform compatibility. In case if you are working on a desktop application, then you are sure that it's going to work on specific platform and specific configuration. But for a web application, it's not guaranteed at all. It can be accessed by any from anywhere in the world, and it can run on any platform, any browser. So you should make sure that your application works on all browsers, on all platforms. The implementation complexity. In case if you are not using right tool or right framework, then it is your responsibility to make sure that it works on all platforms. So there are a lot of complexity involved, and not only the complexity part, the state maintenance. as it is happening through HTTP protocol, it's a status stuff, and you should write down piece of code from your side to maintain the state without sacrificing scalability aspects. So in case if your concurrent number of users increases or user base increases, then your application should scale to meet that requirement. So there are a lot of complexity involved in development, and highly dynamic business model. It changes, your business model changes drastically, and maybe like a couple of weeks before production, your manager may ask you to change some functionalities as it is required by the business. So there are a lot of complexity involved, and time to market is another aspect where you you may not get much time to focus on business functionalities. Technology complexities. You should focus on business functionality, and time to market is very important for any product. So these are the high-level complexities involved. So how do you overcome this kind of complexities? By picking up the right framework or right tool, and the framework should be toolable. Toolable means it should be IDE friendly, like you should get a chance to use popular IDEs like Eclipse, NetBeans, or something like that instead of doing coding in TextPad. So the framework should be toolable, and it must be simple, complete, and addressing all layers of the application. And it should, of course, should hide the runtime complexity from the developer. So these are the common solutions what you should look for. And in case if you look for a framework that meets this kind of solution, you may see lots of things around you. Like JSF could be one candidate. Along with that, you may see Tapestry, Wicked, Madin, GWT, Grail, Struts, and a lot more. So how do you pick up the right stuff from this crowd? You may go for some sort of proof of concept implementation. Generally, guys may pick up some specific use case from their application and build some proof of concept. Then see how compatible, how close that framework meets your use case requirements. Then see the popularity of the framework, community acceptance. Then other aspects like easier to learn, the learning curve part. Intuitiveness, it means by looking at some specific tag, if you can guarantee that that tag is going to work in this way, then that is termed as intuitiveness of the framework. So that's a very important. And standard, in case if you are going for some standard-based framework, then advantage would be like it can run on different platforms, provided the platform supports the standard. Then there are a lot more on top of this. A couple of things are the resource availability. In case if you are a manager or an architect who is responsible for recruiting folks for developing this something, then you should pick up a framework which has enough developers available in the market. Then out-of-the-box features, instead of building something from your side, if the framework provides those features, that would save your time. Then scalability and reliability aspects. Your application is going to work on top of the framework. So framework should be scalable, and it should be reliable in the sense whenever user base changes. Your product may have 1,000 users at present, and maybe like 1 year or a couple of years down the line, it may increase to 5,000 or 10,000. So your application should not fail at that time. It should scale to meet the user base. So all these aspects are very important while choosing the framework. Now, in case if you are going to choose JSF as a framework, then there are a couple of reasons for you to choose that. One is it's standard based, then very active community, if it offers multiple standardized implementation, then pluggable architecture, and support for internationalization and accessibility part, and a lot more. These are very important. These are a couple of important points that I am going to discuss. Then evaluation of JSF. This is important when we talk about cross-breeding of component libraries, because when JSF started, nobody talked about mixing different component libraries, because that was literally not possible at all. Now let us see like what was the objective behind say defining a standard like JSF and where we are currently. JSF, when started, we had a JSR called JSR 1.2.7, and the JSR objectives were standardize the web UI. At that time, we didn't have any standard framework like JSF. A couple of component-oriented frameworks were there. One was Tapestry and a couple of things more. So one objective was to standardize the web UI, and the second one was provide simple Java representation for your user interface. Like, you should get a chance to access the UI as components from your class and manipulate that. Then automatic generation of output. Your output generation should get decoupled from your framework stuff. In the sense, later point, if you want to generate output for a terminal device or some other channel, then from the developer side, it should not be an issue. It should not be an issue in the sense it should be handled at framework level, one level below. So developer should focus on his business logic rather on the technology side. Then Java being model for event handling. It's more like say the way your desktop applications works. Java Swing application works, where if you hit on a button, then you may write down the action events in your Java class. The same way, why can't we do that for a web UI? That was the objective behind going for this specific item. Then a couple of things more: validation support for internationalization and accessibility. But all these were good, but that was not good enough to build huge enterprise applications. So when you see the history of JSF, it started in 2004. It was based on Java server, JSR 1.2.7, and the first release happened in March 2004, and later there was a patch set release which happened in May 2004 because of some bug fix and other stuff. It was a minor release without any major changes in the feature. Then there happened one more release close to that. It happened in May 2006. That release was more focused on something called the view handling part and EL expression handling. But again, those things were not enough to meet what community was looking for or what developers were looking for. So later what happened was JSF 2.0 happened. It happened in 2009. So that was a breakthrough in the history of JSF. In other words, say if you build an application by choosing JSF 1.1 or 1.2, I don't think you would use core JSF stack as is for building huge enterprise applications. You may end up in choosing other frameworks which is available on top of JSF, because the core JSF thing, what is available out of the box, were not enough to meet your requirement. So guys there were a lot of smart guys. So what they did was they built component libraries on top of JSF. And there were a lot of open source libraries were available on top of JSF, like say rich faces, for example, ice faces. Later, say recent past, prime faces came into picture. So those things were actually JSF 1.2 based component libraries were missing one important piece. They went ahead and implemented their own Ajax support, their own resource handling, their own CSS handling. So what happened was, in case if you want to build some applications by mixing components from different families, it was literally not possible at all. So nobody actually tried that. Later in JSF 2.0, we standardized the Ajax part. We, in the sense, the guys who is behind JSF, they standardized the Ajax part and resource handling part. So that changed the development strategy based on JSF. In the sense, you could easily pick up components from different families and try mixing up. Still, it's not a well-proven solution as such, but it became a reality. At least you could give it a try. So in the next few slides, we are going to discuss where we are, like while mixing component libraries, where we are, and what are the possible issues you may see, and what are the possibilities on mixing the libraries. So JSF 1.0 is the first release, and 1.1 was bug fixes and minor improvements. In 1.2, like we could see a lot of few enhancements like view handling and EL expression and JSTL support. But JSF 2.0 is considered as a major breakthrough in the history of JSF. So it has support for facelet, Ajax support, then more memory scopes, error handling is improved, and a lot more. So that's what we are seeing here. And among these important, features, built-in Ajax support is very important, because till that time all JSF based frameworks were doing their own Ajax or cooking their own Ajax solutions. So which phases had their own Ajax solution, and prime phases has prime phases was not there at that time. Ice phases had their own solutions, and like that it goes. In JSF 2.0, what happened was all guys went ahead and implemented the standard part. So if Ajax became part of Ajax, that tag became part of JSF component library, and it has been supported by all UI component libraries, which is our job. Now let us see the challenges in interoperability. Like in case if you are trying to mix JSF 2.0 based libraries, and what are the challenges you may face. So there are a lot of JSF 2.0 based libraries. One is JBoss rich faces and ice faces, then prime faces, open faces, and a lot more. And one is Oracle AD faces rich client. I belongs to that team, but we are not going to discuss Oracle ADF here. Our focus would be on open source stuff. Now, why one requires to mix JSF libraries, or why should I look at other libraries? In case if I decide to use, say, library X, then why should I look at Y? One reason is your business use case is very complex, and one specific component library doesn't provide the things what you're looking for. It provides partially, and partially the rest of things are available in other frameworks you really want to mix those things and get the best out of it. And another use case could be, say you have a set of resources available who are well-versed on framework X, and set of resources available who are actually fine with framework Y. So you want to make both the teams happy, which may not be practically existing but still happens. Then certain UI features are better in one framework. That may be one more use case than skill set of developers. So how many of you have happened to or tried mixing different kinds of JSF libraries? So were you successful? Yeah. Moving on to our things. JSF 1.x based component libraries were not really interoperable. Means you cannot mix those things and make it work, even for simple use cases, mainly due to the custom solution for Ajax and resource handling. It is, in other words, when you run a page, this one specific library would try to initialize specific set of JavaScripts, and other components, other set of components from different library would try to initialize other set of JavaScripts. And if these guys are based on same set of JavaScript libraries, say, for example, prime phases and rich phases use jQuery as underlying JavaScript library stuff. And in case if they are using different version of jQuery, then you are in trouble. So literally it was not possible at all. Then JSF 2.0 put forward an idea of component library interoperability by standardizing the following, like Ajax and resource loading. You can see that resource loading means the style sheet and JavaScript things, which is now actually comes under your resource folder and is getting loaded in a standardized way. So I'm going to explain a couple of 4 or 5 use cases here, where mixing of component libraries were used. These are purely based on my experience while working with different, say, teams within Oracle or outside Oracle. So these are very basic use cases, but what I'm trying to show here is it's possible, and I'm not going to say that this is a well-proven solution as such. Rather, it's a first step in the right direction. And maybe like later point, it would be a reality. But as of now, it's possible, but you should be very careful while doing or while mixing different component libraries. That's a disclaimer. So client-side validation support by adding a rich validator. Rich validator is from rich phases. It has certain advantages, saying that, say, it validates some contents on the client side. So it has a support for that. So let us see whether we can add the rich validator to any other UI components. So in this example, we are going to use rich validator with prime phases component. Say I'm using input text field from the prime phase component library, and it's getting validated against the rich validator. So it works. I'll show a demo after discussing these 5 use cases. So it works. So this is one use case where people may go for mixing, say, tags from different component libraries. Another use case is layouting UI stuff. Layouting UI means when you build UI, ideally you should not use any absolute positioning or HTML stuff for layouting your page. Rather, you should try to use the layouting components provided by the framework. So there are a lot of layouting components available in prime phases and rich phases and other components. So in case if you feel that layouting component from the framework what you decide to use is not enough, and you started looking at other frameworks, then probably you can give it a try. You can get the layouting components from other framework and give it a try, try mixing different things. That's what we are going to discuss in this use case. So here I'm using PanelGrid from the prime phases component library, and it's getting mixed with this doesn't contain any other component library component tags. It does just contain JSF tags, but it works with rich phases components as well. So the child components can be from rich phases or from any other component library. So PanelGrid from prime phases has header and footer and a lot more other features. Then another use case what I have noticed was data table from one component library, and while clicking on a specific row or specific button they want to use, or the specific team wants to display the selected data in a pop-up. So the pop-up could be coming from a different component library. It could be from prime phases or some other stuff. So this also works, and the other way around as well, in the sense you could use table from prime phases and pop-up from rich phases. That also works. So these things are working for specific different teams. So it doesn't mean that it may work for you. Instead of following this strategy blindly, you should give it a try before implementing in your applications, because that is there are a lot of if and else conditions here, and few things you may need to note down are one important stuff is, while mixing different components on a same page, you should be very careful, and you should evaluate the strategy before implementing in your real life application. Get a use case from your application and try out the use case by picking up components from different families and implement that, then run the application and see the runtime behavior, then do a performance test and a stress test before deciding on that. So this use case also works. I do have a demo for this. A table from rich phases and a pop-up component from prime phases. So this pop-up dialog will display selected rows detailed value on the on the dialog part. Then partial view processing, like the Ajax update on a page. So the event generation component can be from a family 1, and the target component could be from family 2. So that also works. Then there is something called, so here if you see the input text from prime face component and rich panel from rich faces. So while keying something in the input text field, the child component in the rich panel gets updated with a keyed in value. So this also works. This works based on the Ajax part. And so here the point is Ajax source and target doesn't need to be from the same family. Then another common use case would be, how many of you used pretty faces? Pretty faces for formula, I mean for modifying, yeah, good. So pretty faces is one component. It's not a component library as such, rather it is meant for beautifying your URLs and other controller related aspects. Like you could provide UID dynamically, and you can even change the URLs based on your use cases. Say JSF creates some URL like /faces/ something .jsf or .xhtml. So if you don't want to display like that, if you want to provide your own URL, then Pretty Faces provide a feature for that. It's easy to use. It works with almost all JSF 2.0 based component libraries. So you just need to configure pretty config.xml file in your project. That's enough. So I'll give you a demo on all these pieces. So this is a simple JSF 2.0 based application. This application has prime faces in place, rich faces in place, and the pretty faces. So the use case 1, it was, while if you remember in the use case 1 we were discussing about using rich validator along with non-rich faces component. We were using prime faces component over there. So let me refresh this guy. So this page contains the layouting is done with prime faces, and the inner components, department ID and department name, they are rich faces components. So I'm going to enter. I have added a validation for department name, saying that the name should be between 3 and the minimum number of characters should be 3. So I'm entering 1 here, or say let it be AD, tabbing out. So you can see the validation gets fired. And if you see the source code, so I'm importing rich faces components, prime faces component, and A4J4 Ajax. So this is the prime faces stuff, and it has a rich message. This is from rich faces, and a validator added. So this gets triggered on completion. Completion means on tabbing out. And the validation is minimum number of characters should be 3, and maximum should be 12. So this works, and if I select admin and enter 10, saved. Now we'll go to the next one. This is all about mixing components and container elements. Container means layouting containers. So in this example, I am using layouting components from prime face, and that's mixed with a rich faces component. So this is the source for that. So this is a panel grid. This is from prime faces, and you could see I have not added any rich face component here, but it works. You can try adding that. And this has Ajax stuff as well. It uses Ajax for updating which panel is from rich faces. So let us key in value here. Phone number could be, say, salary could be 1,000. So you could see that when I keyed in Tom here, it got updated on bottom, the first name part. So the Ajax part works, and the component container is through, the layouting is done through prime face component, which is PanelGrid, and which provides, it has a header and footer part. I'm not using it here, but that would be an added advantage of using this part. And even JSF has a PanelGrid, but doesn't have these features provided by the prime faces PanelGrid. And if you save it, it's saved. You can move to our first thing. Then the next use case was how to use rich faces table along with a dialog from prime face component. So let us go ahead and use it. So this table is from rich faces, and let us select a row here. Then view department. This table displays department details, and I want to view a specific department in a pop-up. So this got displayed. So this dialog is from prime faces, and the table is from rich faces. So that works. And the other way around, let us see prime faces table and rich faces pop-up. Let's select the second row here. View employees. So here the table is from prime faces and the dialog is from rich faces. I'll show you the implementation part as well. So this was for, let us select this guy, list. So this is for the first one. This table is from rich faces, and on selection it triggers an Ajax event, and it renders something called dialog. Let us see where the dialog is defined. It is defined here, and the dialog is from prime faces. So on selection of the row, this prime face component gets updated. So it means that rich face things update the prime face component, and that works. And the next thing was prime face table. Say you have data table here, and this is from prime faces, and the pop-up is from rich faces. That is getting updated through this guy, the command button from the component control. So this updates the pop-up panel. So this also works. There's no issue at all. Now let us move back to our index page.
You have a prime faces data table with an A4J event handler in it?
A4J, I never tried that. It should work, I guess. It should work. You can give it a try. Have you faced any issues on that? Have you tried that, or?
No, I was just curious.
Yeah, it should work out of the box.
I can't think of a reason why I would want to.
Yeah, you may not require that, but here the reason for me to use that was purely because there was something called, while selecting a row, I just need to update a couple of things, which is actually working with the A4J Ajax, and it was not working with the default what's called JSF Ajax part. And what I'm trying to say here is all these things, when I say it works here, these were really working for me. It doesn't mean that everything will work out of the box, because there are a lot of catches here and there, and it's not well-proven solution as such. Rather, it's the first step towards the right direction, because in future, maybe like sometime later, if you are getting a chance to mix all these pieces and work out of the box, means that would be really great, because there are a lot of libraries available, and few components are actually good in one library, and few components are very good in other libraries. So if you can get best out of all, then that would be a good thing to have for the community. That's what we are trying to see. And in case if you are deciding to, I do have some guidelines towards the end. In case if you are deciding to mix the components, then please make sure that you did enough study on that part, and you are supposed to build a POC before finalizing on that call, because the POC or proof of concept, POC means proof of concept, that may give you the catches and the other flows as well. Like it's as I said, each component. The major issue here is if you take prime faces or rich faces or any other component libraries, they are most of them are using jQuery under the cover, and prime faces could be using version of jQuery version something 1 says XX, and rich faces could be using x.y or something. So everything is going for a toss. And prime faces could be using jQuery's UI and other libraries, and rich faces may not be using those. So those things are actually like a bit confusing, or putting us in trouble. I'm talking to you as a developer. So we may need to have some standardized way of doing it. So we do have some guidelines on it. I'll talk about these pieces during our guideline discussion. Now, closed component update. This again, I think we have seen that. Anyway, I'll show you once again. So here, if I click on this thing, you can see that the update happens say at the bottom part for the first name. If I enter, say, Alex here, it gets updated. So here, this component is from prime faces, and it updates the rich faces part. Let me open the file. This guy uses Ajax, and you can see that it's from prime faces, and this part is from rich faces. So this component could be anything. The part is, I'm updating the rich panel, the parent panel. Sorry?
The version of JSF that you're using, is it the RI? Is it the Mojara RI?
Yeah, Mojara, right. It comes with the NetBeans stuff. Yeah. I'll show you one more demo in the sense, in case if you are planning to build some POC, there is an easy way. How many of you use NetBeans for building JSF-based applications? Great. And have you ever tried using the component part, which is available as part of Wizard, where you can pick up prime faces, rich faces, ice faces? Tried that? Okay. There is actually like I think other folks are not aware of that. I'll show you, like, in case if you are planning to build some proof of concept, then there's an easy way. So that may save a lot of time, and you can directly start working on the POC, proof of concept, if you use NetBeans, that wizard for building JSF-based applications. So the last part was the pretty faces, where the URL changes. If you see the create, I'm going to click the create new departments there. You can see that /faces/department/create.xhtml. So you don't have any control on the URL part. If you want to change that, it can be done through another component stack. It's known as pretty faces. So here, I'm going to click on show all departments items. So you can see here, the URL comes as say demo web app/dpt. It doesn't have faces or doesn't have any other .xhtml stuff. So it's done through pretty faces, and if you use pretty faces, you can configure the URLs in web.xml file, saying that for this URL pattern, For this view ID, display this pattern. So that's what you are seeing here. Here I said that /faces/department/list.xhtml should get replaced with /dept. That's why you are seeing /dept on top on the URL part. So that's about the use cases. Now let us see how to build a simple POC in case if you are going to use or if you are going to try out the component breeding, like if you want to build a POC and see whether mixing of the component libraries works for your application, then there's an easy way. Download NetBeans and go to the new project. Select Java Web as a project type, project template, and select the first one, web application. So let us name it as JSF demo or something. And here, sorry, these are default things, so don't change anything, just leave it as is. On the next, say on the fourth step, select Java server faces. There you may see something called components. Go to the tab. Then it lists all the components, like prime faces, ice faces, and rich faces. So prime faces actually comes along with NetBeans. So other things you may need to download and create libraries. I do have libraries created, so I could I'm using that say which is actually exposed through this dialog. Otherwise, this dialog would give me a chance to create library. And while creating library, you are supposed to provide the jar file. So you should have these jar files locally. In other words, say you should use the prime faces 3.2.jar or something and create library by clicking on it and class libraries and select this. Then if you click on OK, it will allow you to pick up the jar folder and pick up the jar folder. Jar folder would be prime faces 3.2.jar file. So it's very easy. Once you downloaded the jar file from the prime faces folder, prime faces site, then it's easy for you to create a library and provide the provide the library name here. Click OK. So that's it. You are done with that. So I am selecting prime faces, ice faces, and rich faces. And if you want to see the libraries I am using for the demo, so they are available locally in my machine. So I am using pretty faces, JSF 2.3.3.jar, then prime faces, sorry, 331.jar, and rich faces. It has two types. One is UI and framework. So you should download all these pieces and provide the names while building libraries. Library is actually one way of grouping all these jars into one logical name and associating the name with the project. So it's another way of adding jar files into the class path. So once you are done with the library creation, then it's easy, like just select the components that you want to include in your project, click finish. Now I do have a local database running, in the sense local Oracle XC database. So I am going to create entities from database. Let me pick up JDBC demo, for example. Yeah. So it displays all the tables available in the schema. So let us select departments and employees, and don't include this guy, departments, employees. Next, provide a package name, say demo.java1. Click finish. So it generates all the JPA classes required for getting data from database. Now the next step is building JSF pages. There is something called JSF pages from entity classes. So let us select the entity classes, finish. So that's it. Your basic, the template stuff is in place. And now if you see the web pages, it has almost all CRUD things are created for you. Like CRUD means create, retrieve, update, delete functionalities for all these entities. So you just need to run the application and test those things. Now the next part, what you may need to do is select the appropriate page and try out or try combining multiple UIs, in the sense components from the different libraries. You can easily do that by entering what's called the appropriate component part here. Enter the stuff what you required. Now you can see it prime phase of welcome page. It displays prime phase of welcome page. It's created by the IDE. Then these things are basic JSF stuff. Doesn't have any framework mixing concept. But it's the next part is actually now ball is in your court. You are supposed to try mixing different components and see whether that works for you. Moving on to our discussion. Now the guidelines, always pick up the best component libraries that meets your use case, that meets your application use case requirements. Try to stick on it. In case if there is no common right and wrong in picking up a component library. Say it all depends on your application. All applications are not unique. Each application has its own use cases, its own functionalities. So pick up the best component library available in the market and try to stick on it. In case if you want to mix different component libraries, then don't listen to anyone. Build a proof of concept and see whether that works for you. If one mixing of component library worked for one person doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. It's because there's no guarantee that all these component libraries are following the same pattern. There's no guarantee on it, because still the skinning aspects and other things are different for different component libraries. So this is the first step. The Ajax standardization was the first step, and it works for a lot of use cases. So you can give it a try. Check the support. In case if you are running into issues, then the best thing is get the support from the community. And you can don't say sleep on the issues. Instead, speak to the component owners. Like each component, say framework component has their own discussion forums, post your queries, and they are quite active on it. They are quite active, so you would get response from them. And if there's something needs to be done from their side, means they would be more happy to do that. So please try on it, and always make sure that, just keep it in mind. 1 + 1 = not 2 when you mix components, because it could be again lead to 1. There are issues, but it may work for a lot of use cases and may not work for some use cases. So always build a POC and take a call, and post your queries in appropriate discussion forums. Then avoid tweaking code if you are not sure what you are doing. Like in case if you are running into issues and if you feel that some JavaScript error is happening, then you may end up in writing some code from your side. If you are sure that say this is the way it should work, then go ahead and do it. Otherwise, don't tweak the code. Instead, try to build a page with components from one family and make another page from another family. Like if you are having components from one family, means it initially, under the cover it uses same JavaScript library. It doesn't conflict with other components libraries. So there are chances for that to work. There are good chances. It will work for sure. But if the moment you are mixing different JavaScript things are actually getting mixed up into one page, and they may conflict. So in case if you are running into issues, and if you have the liberty of changing the UI, then try to segregate the UI into two pages and then pick up the components and make sure and build a homogeneous page, in the sense components from one family. Put those components in one page, and then build the second page by picking up components from the second family. That will work. Then check whether if your UI breaks, check whether it's related to JavaScript. That's a very common issue I have noticed. So JavaScript means, as I said, the jQuery issue, because different component families are using different jQueries, so that may again put you in trouble. So just try to debug that and find out whether it's related to jQuery. And there are a lot of workarounds provided, like initialize a specification of jQuery by using the resource tag and all. So you can go for that if that works for you. Otherwise, say as I said, stick on some specific components for a page and build another page with different components. So I think we are pretty much done with our session. So in summary, like interoperability was not easy in JSF 1.0, 1.x based component libraries, but it's possible, and it works for a lot of applications. So JSF 2.0 is the first step in that direction, and mix the component libraries judiciously. So don't listen, again I repeat, don't listen to anyone. Try out in your own and make sure that works for you. So any questions? Yeah, please.
You said earlier not to use a lot of your own CSS and
Right.
your own HTML when you're laying out your pages. And
Right.
only use the component libraries. Why is that?
The idea is there are the basic the design architecture of JSF is decouple the rendering part from the UI design, from the UI template. In the sense, even if you are building something for a web UI, say later point is a theoretical concept. Later point, if you want to target another device, then it should be possible by decoupling or by adding one rendering part for each component. So the idea behind JSF is, or one good point about JSF is, JSF decouples say the rendering part from the actual component logic. So we are actually by default it renders as HTML tags. So each component are getting rendered as HTML tags. So the moment you introduce HTML, raw HTMLs in your XHTML page, you are actually bypassing that rule. In the sense, you are mixing HTML and JSF. So ideally, you are not supposed to mix a JSF tags and HTML tags. The advantage is, as I said, it's a theoretical advantage. In case if you are targeting a different device later on, then by changing the framework component, you should be able to generate different output for each component. So while generating different output, if your XHTML has say some raw HTML tags which cannot be interpreted by your rendering logic, then you may run into trouble. So that's one reason. And another reason is the moment you write or put some style sheet, then you are responsible to make sure that this works on all browsers. Otherwise, the underlying stack say takes care of the compatibility issues, because your application is supposed to work across the globe on different browsers, on different operating systems. So the moment you add custom JavaScript or custom CSS, then you should make sure that this is compatible with all the browsers or upcoming browsers, or when downward compatibility as well. So these are the things actually what I have noticed. Yes. Yes. ADF, yeah. ADF actually uses Trinidad filter, and that creates a rendering context which conflicts with the other stuffs, other component libraries. So when I tried, it didn't work for me. So I guess the Trinidad stuff needs that tweaking, and once that tweaking tweaking is done, it will work. But as of now, out of the box, it may not work. It's ADF faces is on top of Trinidad library, so that has a Trinidad filter which is configured in your web.xml file, and when a request comes, it will create a rendering context which would be used for rendering each component. So this guy actually puts other folks in trouble. Yeah.
Prime Faces has a Trinidad contributor project. It's a separate jar. You drop it, master, creates that rendering context for you.
Sorry?
Prime Faces has a separate jar file.
Okay.
Prime Faces -- Trinidad.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's hidden somewhere.
right.
Creates that rendering context.
Oh, right. I think I read that that is actually tweaked by the one Prime Faces guy, and he provided a jar file, right? So, yeah, correct. So the story, yeah, the story remains same. The issue, yeah, correct. What he did was actually he intercepted that part and added some tweaking. Yeah. Thanks for the input. Yeah. Even I think it's available if you Google for it. Everybody, we would be able to. Yes. Yeah. Right. Correct. Yeah.
Don't Prime Faces and Rich Faces provide a mechanism for you to specify which version of jQuery you want to use?
Sorry, which version of jQuery?
Yeah.
There is nothing like jQuery, but what I have seen is Prime Faces has, in case if you are running into issues, one workaround provided by Prime Faces folks where use a Prime Faces specific jQuery by using the resource tag. So that works, but there we cannot specify the version as such, but we could at least would be able to download Prime Faces specific jQuery stuff, so which may work. I never seen that any version related things, because the Prime Faces needs the UI plus the core jQuery stuff, and that is actually conflicts with Rich Faces jQuery related. That's a major reason, and maybe like it would be great if they can communicate and come up with some common stuff. But as of now, this is the stage. Yeah.
We did yesterday. Space guys, and there's a Rich Faces.
Okay.
That does not include jQuery.
It is not.
Yeah, there's a resource mapping.
Okay.
And they'll not include jQuery.
Uh-huh.
But there is only one jQuery.
Oh, okay. So that worked. Okay, great. Thanks for the input. Yeah. So which is for actual application you are trying, or?
No, just for
Okay, just for sake of, okay, great. Which company you work with? Which company you work? Right, okay, cool. So thank you very much. For any more questions? Yeah, please.
Also, Prime Faces has Rich Faces themes, so you can make Prime Faces like Rich Faces.
Yeah, right. That's actually one good thing. Yeah, I read that. Yeah. Yeah, great. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you guys found it useful and interesting. Thanks a lot for your time and your patience. Yeah. Thanks.